Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, we shall be looking at the question, will the Catholic, the Trump's Catholic presidency, will that presidency stop the mass deportation that we're seeing in America? No, we know that when Trump came into power, that he pledged to deport thousands, hundreds of thousands of so-called illegal migrants, right? Undocumented immigrants who are domiciled in the United States, who have been there, or some of whom are crossing the border or the borders as we speak in the United States. Now, that is interesting because we're hearing the Pope Francis, and the Catholic Church in particular, coming out against this mass deportation. Now, for those of you who do not know, Trump won his presidency based on the Catholic vote. If those of you also don't know that the United States population comprises 20 to 30% Catholics, that's a lot of Catholics in one nation that deemed itself to have been a Protestant nation. The United States is fast becoming a Catholic country. Now, with the hundreds of thousands of what we call Latinos, who are mostly Catholics, who hailed from Latin America and whose nations have been Catholic and hail the Catholic religion as their preferred religion, you must understand that the Catholic vote is very important in the United States at the moment. Now, there was a time when the Catholic Church was first undermined, and it was a church that the founding fathers and the early colonial Americans were not particularly interested in having, because of their recollections of what took place in Europe and also their knowledge of the Catholic Church. The whole matter of the Protestant Reformation was that they were anti-Catholic. And not that they disliked the Catholic, but they were anti the virtues, the beliefs, the credos, the ethos of the Roman Catholic papacy, which is really a mystery faith. It is rooted and grounded in mystery Babylon. And sometimes you have to look carefully at the Bible, particularly Revelation 18, 13, 17. If you read these chapters and you delve also into Daniel 7 and 2, you'll understand very clearly what I mean by this mystery Babylon. It's a mysterious church. It's a church that is shrouded in lots of secrecy. And one doesn't even only have to read the Bible, even though the Bible lays the standard and the most comprehensive study that you can ever undertake. But if you read secular history also, the Vatican Connections, for example, that's the book, then you'll understand what the church is all about. Operation Gladio is also another book that can be read, and hundreds and thousands of books that have been written on the Roman Catholic papacy. Now, we must understand here that when we talk about church, we're talking about a system. We're not talking about people. There are people within the Roman Catholic Church who are great people, wonderful people, and who are Christ-centered, who love Christ, and obviously Christ is calling them out of a most corrupt system. When we talk about politics, the same thing. A lot of times people think I'm attacking individuals. I'm not attacking individuals. There are some great politicians who are who are in Congress, and they're doing the best that they can to uphold the Constitution. But there are systems at play at the moment who are trying to undermine and to shred all the principles of the Constitution, which is actually rooted in the Protestant Reformation, in Protestant ethos, right? That there should be a separation of church and state. The Catholic Church has never believed in the separation of church and state. In fact, the Catholic Church believes that where it is, that it should control the politics. It is the king. It is the monarch of the world, as the Pope has suggested. Now, we must understand now that without that Catholic vote, Donald Trump perhaps would not have gotten a second term. Now, we have here Irish Rover, and this is the Catholic case for Donald Trump, and this is coming from the irishrrover.net, right? And it presents a lot of cases and arguments for which Donald Trump should have been the preferred of the two evils, right? Because that is what Pope Francis had suggested, that Catholics should vote for the better of the two evils, right? If you will. So we have here that on November 5th, 2024, Americans will elect either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris as the country's next president. For many Catholics, the election has become a source of dread, a choice between the lesser of two evils, as Pope Francis has stated, in which neither candidate appears to adequately reflect the values of the faith. So Pope Francis is suggesting that he's not for either of the candidates, right? But he suggested then that he would prefer the lesser of the two evils. Who was the lesser of the two evils? Well, Donald Trump believes, and he said at the Al Miller, meeting there that they had just prior to the election, the United States general election, that he thinks the Pope is on his side because, Donald Trump says that he is for the Catholics and he is going to go there and do all what the Catholics want him to do. Right? Donald Trump is on record saying that. So the fact of the matter here, we see where Donald Trump thinks that he is, in fact, a Catholic president. For those of you who are also not aware, Donald Trump was trained 2 years at Fordham University. And Fordham University is a Jesuit university. So Donald Trump identifies himself, even though people have known that he's not necessarily a Christian per se, but they identify him, however, with the Presbyterian faith. But Donald Trump, to me, he is an interfaith guy as much as Barack Hussein Obama was. He joins whatever religion that he deems is going to allow him to achieve whatever economic, political, or whatever goal that he's working towards. That's Donald Trump. He's an opportunist, as many of us already know. Now, even Barack Obama, for those of you who also do not know, that if you read a lot of biographies on Barack Obama, and one of the most comprehensive ones written was by the same guy that actually was his publicist. I'm always forgetting his name, but he wrote a book on, I think it's David something. He wrote a book on Obama, right? And in which he mentioned, and other texts, and he himself also, Obama, in his autobiographies have mentioned that, the Catholic priests helped him in his organizing when he was, before he went to law school and he was being trained in organizing, right? A mobilizer or whatever he was doing there. The Jesuits, the Catholic Jesuits helped him to do that. They mobilized him. And we know that, from the Clintons, who went to Jesuit University, at Georgetown University, even the same George W. Bush, who, I can't remember his faith, but, he pretends and as if he's coming from also a Protestant faith. But when you look behind the scenes, he was also influenced by a lot of Catholics, right? So the United States presidency since, I would say since maybe Reagan, right? Since Ronald Reagan, has been influenced a whole lot by the Roman Catholic papacy. We must understand that. Now, here is this saying: nowhere in modern American history has the country seen a candidate who has posed as much of a threat to the faith as Vice President Kamala Harris. This is what the Catholic paper is saying from Ireland. And, Ireland is a Catholic country. Throughout her time in public office, she has used her power to vilify Catholics at every turn. So they're suggesting here the Catholic Church was really anti-Kamala Harris, and that is why they mobilized themselves and ensured that Donald Trump got the election. And in all of the major states there, the firewall, what we call it, those sort of states, the swing states, as it were. All of these states, had it not been for the Catholic Church, Donald Trump would not have swept all of these swing states. But they were particularly important for him in sustaining his victory, right? And in solidifying his victory. And that is something you have to understand. There are lots of reading on that. I can't read everything to you, but these are based on my research. I will try to attach all of the articles that I have garnered here in the description, okay? Now, as a prosecutor in California, Kamala Harris weaponized her office to prosecute pregnancy centers that refused to offer access to abortion. As a senator, she tried to sabotage the nomination of a federal judge because of his affiliation with the Knights of Columbus. Finally, in her current role, the Biden-Harris administration has launched a domestic terrorism investigations into Latin mass parishes, raided the homes of pro-life activists, and placed school board parents who have protested leftist sexual education curriculums on a DOJ watch list. So if you were paying attention to the goings on during the presidential election, the US presidential election last year, just before it was held, the election day was held, you would have noticed that Kamala Harris was absent from the Catholic Al Davis charity dinner, right? She was absent, and I thought that was a visible absence. And I was wondering, what is she thinking? Does she already know that she is going to be defeated? I don't know. But I thought that when I saw that she had not attended that dinner, I realized that something was really not good. And Donald Trump went there and he seized the moment. He seized the opportunity of suggesting to the Catholics that Kamala is anti-Catholic and that he should be the preferred candidate because he loves the church and he loves and believes in everything that they do. Right? Trump is, you go and read his quotes, you know, I can't read everything to you. The other candidate is former President Donald Trump. This is what now the Catholic thinks of Donald Trump. Trump himself is not a practicing Catholic, nor does he fully align with many doctrines of the Catholic Church. What Trump does offer, however, is a respect for the church and a willingness to elevate Catholics to positions of power. And let me just suggest here that this is the National Catholic Reporter, and I think they were talking about the candidacy of Trump's administration and the people that he has selected to work in his administration. Let me see if I can share my screen so that you can see and you can follow what I am reading. Very important that you do your own research and that you educate yourself more than just what you're seeing. Many of us, you know, we believe in just what we see, but there are lots of things happening behind the scenes that we are not seeing, of which we have to educate ourselves. Now, so we have here Trump's Catholic cabinet. That's it. How will their faith shape their work? All right, so this is Trump's Catholic presidency. Before entering his confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill, Sean Duffy gathered in the hallway with his family, which includes 9 children, and led them in praying a Hail Mary. He was later confirmed as Secretary of Transportation. Duffy is not the only Catholic among President Donald Trump's proposed advisors. If all of his nominees are confirmed, Trump's cabinet would be comparable to what has been called the most Catholic cabinet in history. The most Catholic cabinet in history, his predecessor, Joe Biden's. Right? So more than a third of Trump's nominees are Catholic. Let me repeat that. More than a third of Trump's nominees are Catholic. Duffy, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe have already been confirmed by the U.S. Senate. One, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is among the most controversial choices, and he's also Catholic and a staunch Catholic and a staunch defender and advocate of the Roman Catholic papacy. Just have to read the history of Robert F. Jr., or F.K. Jr., as he's popularly called. And many people are opposing themselves, or their faith rather, in Robert F. Kennedy based on the book that he wrote on the pandemic, and they think that he is a defender of, the environment and also of our health. That is yet to be seen, because we wonder if his faith is going to conflict with perhaps his personal beliefs. And where that is so, when a Catholic personal beliefs conflict with that of his faith, he has to submit to that of his faith, because that is how that religion is run, particularly when he occupies such a very important position in government. Okay? So most grew up in Catholic families, although two are converts. Several have rarely, if ever, talked about their faith publicly. Others credit it as the reason for their conservative political views, especially on topics such as abortion or religious liberty. So the Catholic faith is putting or placing a lot of value on abortion and religious liberty. And if you notice, the Catholic Church has never been interested in religious liberty throughout history. So what is this religious liberty that they're talking about? Well, you have to really delve into that. It's religious liberty based on what the Catholic Church desires, what they want, what they say, their diktats, right? Their edicts. That is what you have to understand. But I think that we are in a secular society right now where people do not really read about religion. They don't study their Bibles. If we were diligent students rather than studies, but if we were diligent students of our Bibles, then we would understand and we would get greater knowledge in terms of the beast, right? The Romans, the reformers, the Protestants, the Protestant reformers, they understood clearly what the beast power was and is. It is the Roman Catholic papacy, right? That is the beast power of Revelation and also of Daniel, but particularly of Daniel, of Revelation 13, which speaks about the land and the sea beasts. The land beast being the United States of America and the sea beast being the Roman Catholic papacy. And that the sea beast will eventually render its power back to the land beast, rather. Let me not confuse the issue. The land beast will eventually render power back to the sea beast, which is the Roman Catholic papacy. And we can see the movements happening right before our very eyes if we're studying and we are watching, right? We should watch and pray. That is what the Bible encourages us to do. Now, PBS News here, Trump signs an executive order to establish a White House faith office. Now, the United States was founded on the ethos, as I suggested, of the separation of church and state, because they understood that that was the primary value of the Roman Catholic papacy, which induced persecution in Europe, right, in which the government and the church were in bed. And when they are in bed, that's the worst form of persecution that can ever be unleashed upon a populace. We must understand that. Don't ever try to merge your faith with your politics, right? They must be separate. It's interesting to note that the United States, having been founded on Protestant values, that the colonials and the people who lived in former times, right up to the 1960s, I would say, up to the 1980s, they understood the vitriol. And I would say probably up to the 1960s, they understood what the Roman Catholic Church was about. But it seems that after that generation died out, those who were living in the 60s and they died out, they would have been born, probably sometime in the late 19th century and early 20th century. And after they had died out, and came the whole hippie movement in the United States and the secularization of United States culture, in terms of people just believing in, science and secular things and materialism. There seemed to have been an eradication of the Roman Catholic faith and its dangers. So we went into the decade of the 80s and 90s, and the Roman Catholic papacy was growing in the United States. First, President Reagan, Ronald Reagan, was the one who reinstituted the diplomatic ties between the United States and the Holy See, right? Because during the Civil War, it was reported, it was revealed that the Roman Catholic Church had played a pivotal role in the rebellion of the southern states. They did, right? They did. And President Abraham Lincoln was briefed on that. If you want to read a very thorough account of that, you can go and read the book 50 Years in the Church of Rome by Charles Chiniquy. 50 Years in the Church of Rome by Charles Chiniquy, right? Who was a former Roman Catholic priest and who was trained in the art of taking over nation states. And he was actually from Canada. And he knew all about what was happening. And he told Abraham Lincoln that he would have died, that the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy, would have eventually murdered him. So Abraham Lincoln knew that he was going to be a sacrifice because he stood out against slavery. The Roman Catholic Church was on the side of slavery. They believed in the so-called states' rights. And we have to now be very careful when we see the Trump presidency now talking about states' rights. And even though you and I might be pro-life and we might be against the large expansions of the federal government and how they are, this woke philosophy and all of that stuff. We have to be careful that the other side might not bring you what you want either. You might be just supporting the other side that is going to be even worse, right? Because it's a merger of church and faith. So the other side, even though I deem also the left to be a secular religion. So either way you take it, I think the Roman Catholic papacy controls both sides, both the Democrats and the Republicans. But I think that the Republicans have a much more toxic form of the merger of church and state. That's my opinion. You're free to disagree. So Trump is suggesting that the whole matter of abortion rights will go back to the states. Education, he's now wants to dismantle the Department of Education and just send back education to the states. The state should be responsible for educating its citizens. Now, when we think about what happened in the South and the fact that many of these so-called Southerners, the ones who were states' rights advocates, they were against, people of color getting an education. And that is why the federal government had to be involved and had to ensure that there were public schools so that they could educate the nation, not only Blacks, but also poor whites, right? We must understand that the same issues that Black Americans and other people of color, that you call them, are afflicted by, the same challenges, poor whites are also afflicted by these same challenges. And that is why Du Bois, W.E. Du Bois, wrote that we more have a class problem than a racial problem in the United States. And that is also why you're seeing where lots of whites and some Blacks are now joining the camp, that's working class white Americans, understand that they could not continue to support neoliberal economic policies. So they voted for Trump. They voted first for Obama. Obama betrayed them. They voted for Trump in the first term. Not sure what they think. I think they perhaps think the pandemic might have derailed his plans, but they think still that Trump's economy during the first term, during the first Trump administration, was much better than the one that we are seeing at the current moment, right? Now, so the PBS, let me see. So the PBS here reported, I think I wanted to read you this. Did I get this? Okay. So Trump signs executive law. Let me take a executive order to establish a White House faith office. So President Donald Trump signed an executive order on Friday to establish the White House faith office as part of the Domestic Policy Council. Now, this is something that is toxic. And he's suggesting here that the reason for his doing it, because the Democrats, the people on the left, and their woke ideology, they have seen religion as a threat. And to some extent, it's true that you could not say anything about the Bible, you could not say anything about God. If we are having a free speech society, you should be able to express yourself anywhere once it's not a threat to society. And religion, for the most part, the Christian religion particularly, is not a threat. Right? So people can express themselves and their opinions about matters, even in public, they should. And those who are atheist also should be able to express their atheistic ethos and values in public, right? We might agree with them, but that is what it's about. And we can have a very respectful and vigorous debate on these matters. Now, First Things is a paper online, firstthings.com. And the title of this article was Why Catholics Voted for Trump, right? Why Catholics voted for Trump. If you notice here, I'm giving you a background into letting you know that a lot of what is happening in the United States now in the Trump administration is controlled by the Roman Catholic Church, whether they like it or not. Okay, a lot of the policies are dictated and are supported by the Roman Catholic Church. As Democrats and others assess the fallout from last week's red bombshell, they're looking at surprises in the exit polls. Here's one that shouldn't be missed. The nation's Catholic voters split 56-41 in favor of Donald Trump. 56-41, that's a huge margin, isn't it? In one way, that endorsement might seem to require explanation. After all, no one's personal feelings have been more exposed to global sunlight than Trump's. And Catholics as a whole, unlike many evangelical Protestants, weren't ground floor MAGA fans. Even so, the fact that a Catholic majority in 2024 signed on to Trump vans makes inescapable sense for at least 3 reasons. Listen to their reasons. First, key Democratic Party policies have been locked in combat with key Catholic moral teachings for a long time. Ever since yesterday's safe, legal, and fair abortions became always, forever, and lots. So the Catholic Church once supported the Democratic Party, but it seems now that there is a shift. And you must recognize political shifts in America. Some of you voted for Democrats because your grandparents voted for Democrats, and they, at that time, the Democratic Party was, they were always flawed, but might have defended the rights of minorities and some basic rights. It's not so anymore. And you've got to understand that the Democratic Party is no longer the party of your grandparents. Very important that you understand that. Not only is this grim consensus longstanding, it's also enforced. Pro-life Democrat wants a political identity is now an oxymoron. Now, so we see that. So they're projecting that the Kamala Harris on the whole, she was very anti-Catholic, and that is why she lost the election. So that is something that we have to come to grips with. The record of Biden-Harris administration, for its part, pushed some voters rightward on its own. In 2020, President Joe Biden won the Catholic vote by just 5%. By just 5%. Look at the huge margin in which Trump garnered the Catholic vote. Biden and Harris then went on to back policies that antagonized many of those same voters. From support for initiatives like the Equality Act, which would have gutted religious freedom, to calling transgenderism the civil rights issue of our time, the second Catholic president seemed scripted by the decidedly un-Catholic human rights campaign. So you can see now that the transgenderism is what has now supplanted civil rights in terms of racial civil rights. So all of you who think that the Democratic Party is defending your racial, identity, it's not doing so. It's not only using it to sort of, deceive you. That's what it is doing. It's a ploy, right? And it's a deceptive ploy that you've got to become aware of, right? Don't think the Democratic Party thinks about minorities. They are in no way concerned about that. And if you look at the transgenderism also, it's an agenda that is rooted in population reduction. All right. So we have to understand all of these agendas very carefully. So Kamala Harris was not particularly pro-Catholic. I am not sure if that's a game that they're playing because shouldn't what's her name, Clinton, Hillary Clinton, I think by now she should understand, having lost the election in 2016, the importance of the Catholic vote, right? She should. So I would think that she would have advised Kamala also on the importance of the Catholic vote. So I don't know if this is a game, this is a charade. You can decide that for yourselves, but we have to understand that this is something that we have to carefully look at, and we have got to carefully assess, right? Very, very important that we understand that. So this is what I'm asking the question. Given that Trump, won the election through the Catholic vote, and that there was a wide margin, 56-41, as first things is suggesting, some report 58-40, some 58-39. We don't know the exact margin, but whatever it is, 56-41 or 58-40, 56-37, whatever, that is a wide margin. And the fact that he won all the swing states and the Catholic vote was instrumental, was pivotal in his winning all of those swing states, suggests the growth and the inordinate influence of the Roman Catholic Church, of the Roman Catholic papacy on US politics. In fact, Pope Francis, who sits and remains hundreds of thousands of miles away from the United States in the Vatican City, he's telling Trump what he should do and should not do. And he's telling Trump that he's against the mass deportations. Because according to Pope Francis, both of these are anti-human agendas. The Kamala's, anti-life, her abortion policy, that's a democratic abortion policy, and Trump's mass deportation effort, both he deems to be anti-human. Right? So the Pope is caught in a bind here, right? So you have on the Democratic side where he's against a so-called abortion. And you really wonder if the Vatican is against abortion when there are so many abortions, or allegations, I should say, of abortions in these Vatican, what do you call these, the people who are studying for nuns and all of that stuff, because we understand that there are a lot of that going on, right? Of lovemaking, of lovey-dovey in these seminaries, these Catholic seminaries where nuns and priests are being prepared for the priesthood and for, do you call it the nunship? I don't know what you call it, the whatever, the women who want to become nuns. And we understand that they have to abort those children because, you don't want it to be known that you were studying to be a celibate and then you end up having a child. So I understand, that there are lots of abortions in those hollowed or behind those hollowed walls, or should be hollowed walls. So we have to understand that this is the height of hypocrisy, right? Being demonstrated by the Roman Catholic Church. But they're playing their role in terms of trying to seize power and trying to ensure that they control US politics by pretending to be pro-life when the Vatican has never been pro-life in its history. In fact, it is that church that has killed millions of people. Millions of people were killed during the Dark Ages under this Roman Catholic papacy. And if you look at the Latin American churches too, the churches in Latin America, and the fact that the church is so wealthy, and these countries are, have so many poor people. I mean, you really wonder who is pro-life here. Now, in liberty of conscience threatened, Catholicism and Protestantism more similar today. They're asking, do we think that Catholicism and Protestantism are similar today? Yeah, they are more similar right now because people they can't distinguish, they can't discriminate between these two religious faiths, I should say, or religious understandings, religious philosophies. The Roman Church now presents a fair front to the world, covering with apologies her record of horrible cruelties. She has clothed herself in Christ-like garments, but she's unchanged. Every principle of the papacy that existed in past ages exists today. The doctrines devised in the darkest ages are still held. Let none deceive themselves. The papacy that Protestants are now so ready to honor is the same papacy that ruled the world in the days of the Reformation, when men of God stood up at the peril of their lives to expose her iniquity. She possesses the same pride and arrogant assumption that lorded it over kings and princes and claimed the prerogatives of God. Her spirit is no less cruel and despotic now than when she crushed out human liberty and slew the saints of the Most High. Right? She slew hundreds of thousands, millions of the saints of the Most High. The papacy is just what prophecy declared that she would be, the apostasy of latter times, 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3 and 4. It is a part of her policy to assume the character which will best accomplish her purpose. But beneath the variable appearance of the chameleon, she conceals the invariable venom of the serpent. So the United States now has got to watch out with regard to the sudden rise of the Catholic papacy in the United States. They must and they should, but they are not alert to the dangers of the Roman Catholic papacy. They think that it's just another church that is responsible for charities around the world and that the Catholic Church has changed. But remember now that the Pope and his office, as they are suggesting, is infallible, right? That's what the Pope has suggested in one of its what do they call these things that they send out, is it yearly that they send these things out? Or yeah, but in one of those wow, releases, let us say, for want of a better word, it's on my tongue and I can't say it. Yes, in one of those pastoral releases, it suggested that the church is infallible, which means that it can't err. So how can it change? God is the only infallible being in the universe, and God does not change. He says, remember the Sabbath day. That's what he means for eternity, because God doesn't change. So what do you think? Do you think that Trump's mass deportation will be stopped by the Roman Catholic Church? I think it will, because the Roman Catholic Church needs that base. They might deport some people who might not be Catholics, who to tell, we don't know. But I think that the Roman Catholic Church is serious about moving huge swath of its adherents, of its parishioners from these Latin American countries to the United States, because they are going to alter the demographics in the United States, which is right now at the moment. I think we can say the United States is fast becoming, if it is not yet, a Catholic country. And we know wherever we have predominantly Catholic countries that there is a wide gap between the rich and the poor. And we are seeing that right now. That was one of the major criticisms of the Vatican and the Catholic churches. Wherever there were predominant Catholic countries, the Protestant nations, like the Dutch nations, like, like the Netherlands and the United States and other, Britain, they would say in these predominantly Protestant nations, there is a growing and thriving middle class where you will not see this huge gap between the rich and the poor. However, in the predominant Catholic nations, there is a palpable difference between the rich and the poor, huge gap, right? And the United States is fast morphing into that sort of society. And if these people continue to be at the helm of policies, because, once they are setting the laws, there is no turning back. That is what you have to understand. One, these laws are on the books. If during the pandemic, they talked about doing this and that, and they also implemented laws and they crafted laws. These laws are on the books and they will not be eradicated. They will be built upon. And that is why they can come now and they can tell you the mistakes that they have made, because having made that mistakes, the laws have already been crafted. They're pretending to you that they made mistakes, right? But the laws are there, and these laws will be called upon at the right moment, right? So you must understand these things. So let me hear from you. Do you think that Trump will, or the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic papacy, will be able to stop the mass deportation? Remember now that Trump is not the mass deporter during the first administration, and his first administration was also backed by Catholic, not the wide gap we're seeing here in the second Trump administration, but he had quite a bit of Catholic support during his first term in office also. So please let me know what you think. And this is a very important topic, and we have to think about it and we have to research it to see what is going on, because it could just be the end of your religious and civil freedom. Once religious freedom goes, then all of your civil freedoms are going to be going out of the door. So hope you understand this, and I hope that, and that is why it's very, very important that you understand the virtues of the Protestant Reformation, not just religion, but the Protestant Reformation. You've got to understand it and to stand on the principles and the ethos of that great Protestant Reformation. All the best to you. See you in another video. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And remember to do your own research, because the truth is the truth.